Hi, welcome to The Inner Way. I'm your host, Father David Smith. We have been, for the last few programs, looking at some passages, a few passages from the writings of Saint Isaac the Syrian, specifically his ascetical homilies, which I've been reading for Lent this year. And I want to read part of homily number 63 today, and specifically the part where he talks about prayer. But prayer also is in need of exercise, so that by its prolonged practice the mind may gain wisdom. For after we have acquired non-possessiveness, which frees our thoughts from bonds, prayer requires long continuance, because the mind is trained by perseverance and much time. Thus it knows to banish its deliberations and learns from much experience that which it cannot gain from elsewhere. Every discipline is strengthened by the discipline which precedes it, and that which comes before it is necessary for the discovery of what follows it. Seclusion precedes prayer, and seclusion itself comes about for the sake of prayer. Prayer is necessary for acquiring love of God, because from prayer we discover the causes for loving God. Wow, there's a lot in that quote there, but what I like especially is how Saint Isaac just talks about the need to practice prayer. Now, it's not simply a matter of saying you do the practice of prayer. I mean, sometimes we use the word practice to mean just doing something like a medical practice. Certainly when you walk into a medical practice, you don't expect that there are going to be people in there who don't know what they're doing and are practicing on you, although I think that sometimes happens. But no, it means that they're doing something. But this is not about the practice of prayer. It's about practicing prayer. So I do several things that are a bit of a challenge to me in my life. I play the violin. I've played the violin for a long time, but I play in an orchestra, and it is necessary for me to practice. I try to practice a little bit every day, especially those hard passages of the pieces we're working on, so that when it comes to the orchestra rehearsals, I'm not, the guy who hasn't practiced and is throwing everybody off, that I can really not only contribute, but also enjoy myself. When you practice something, even for a little bit each day, you learn after a while to enjoy it. The same thing with running. I love to go running, but if I take a week off from going running, that first, and especially the second time I go out, I really feel it. It's not really pleasurable anymore. But guess what? I go through that because I know that, yes, the third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time in a row that I go out and I run, I'm gonna feel great. I'm going to feel good while I'm doing it, and I'm going to feel great when it's done. That's the key, is getting through that practice period into the place where you actually begin to enjoy it. Now, St. Isaac is saying the same thing applies to prayer. And for a lot of people, I know that when I've done retreats about prayer, and I talk to people about prayer, and they just don't see why do I have a need to practice prayer? I close my eyes, I fold my hands, I tell God what I want. there it is. It's not like I have to practice that and get better at doing it. Close my eyes harder or fold my hands closer together. Why am I practicing prayer? Well, there are a lot of people, and he talks about non-possessiveness pretty quickly at the beginning of this. After we have acquired non-possessiveness, which frees our thoughts from bonds, prayer requires long continuance. So what happens is that when we spend a time every day in prayer and expand that time and grow in what we're doing, after a while we stop closing our eyes and folding our hands and telling God what we want. And we go to the next stage of prayer, which is spending time in the presence of God. That's why I talk so much about the Jesus prayer. And if you've gone to my website, FatherDavidSmith.com, we actually have a whole section, I don't know what they call it, a section of the website called the Jesus Prayer Group, where Presbytera Donna and I pray the Jesus Prayer. This is something that I do on a daily basis, depending on what my schedule is like, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but it all takes practice. It takes practice to concentrate my mind. It takes practice to stop telling God what I want, to stop telling God what He should do, and to start dwelling in His presence. It's something that requires practice. It's something that when you practice it for a while, you begin to learn to enjoy it and really benefit from prayer. Now, he talks about every discipline is strengthened by the discipline which precedes it. Now, when I first read that sentence, I thought, what discipline precedes prayer? And what do I really have to have before I pray? You know, St. John Climacus talks about getting ready to pray when in the beginning of his book, The Ladder of Divine Ascent. And in that book, he says it's the total renunciation of the world is needed first, and then you begin to practice prayer. That's a bit much for some people, but that's essentially the same thing that Saint Isaac is talking about. But in this case, here in this quotation I just read, he has something that is attainable for you and attainable for me. It says, every discipline is strengthened by the discipline which precedes it, and that which comes before it is necessary for the discovery of what follows. Seclusion precedes prayer. Seclusion precedes prayer. This, I think, is a fantastic piece of advice. We need seclusion. Now, what does it mean, seclusion? Does it just simply mean you need to be alone for a little while? You know, there was, I think, a study done this week that came out that said that spending a little time by yourself is critical for everybody. Well, I've known that for years, and I'm sure that a lot of people have. But this is different. Seclusion preceding prayer is a seclusion that is distinct. It's not just you sitting and daydreaming or sitting and thinking about what you might want to do and so on. It is a seclusion particular to the practicing of prayer. Seclusion. It is a seclusion where you can be by yourself. A seclusion that is probably going to be the same time every day, and a seclusion which is fairly robust. I had a friend or a parishioner, I think it was a parishioner, who told me that she said her prayers every morning while she was brushing her teeth. I said, oh, well, that's great. I mean, especially if you brush your teeth for 20 minutes, that would be wonderful. But she didn't brush her teeth for 20 minutes. No, to have a real time of prayer when you're not doing anything else. Some people pray while they're driving to work and things like that. Well, it depends on how long you drive to work and what kind of prayers you're doing. But the practice of prayer is preceded, as St. Isaac says, by seclusion, by giving ourselves, by planning ahead to have that time when we can spend time with God. Well, what beautiful words from St. Isaac the Syrian. I think I could spend twice as long, 3 times as long talking about this passage as well as many other passages from his fabulous and spiritually beneficial writings. But that's enough for this week. I hope you can join us next week. We'll continue our time with St. Isaac the Syrian. Until then, God bless you, and I'll see you in church.